Friends, it's 6:34. I'm Eric Sterling. I'm currently the chair of the Montgomery County Leasing Advisory Commission, and I call this meeting, the special meeting of the commission, to order. It is May 31st, 2023. Notice was provided to all the members and to the public. Our agenda today is to discuss expedited bill 27-23. I'm very, very pleased that Council Member Don Lutke, the sponsor of the legislation, is able and willing, eager to join us. And we'd like to recognize you for whatever comments you'd like to make to explain the expedited bill, and how long in your own planning were you planning to be able to join us this evening?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is an extra special add-on to today's calendar. So I can hang around till about 7 if that's okay with everybody. But Sarah Wolf from my office is on here, and from our central council staff, of course, Susan Frog and Logan and Konda Kile, who did the bill drafting for this. So everybody's listening and paying attention.
Great. Well, council members, so just that's very helpful for us. So welcome, and you're recognized for as much time as you need.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Mr. Chair, would we not want to make known the persons who are on the call, who the commissioners are who are present?
Since it's being recorded, their presence is already identified. Vernon, if you'd like to call the roll, we certainly can do that.
I don't waste time if you don't feel it's necessary. Well,
I will note that we have a quorum. We have Sherry Branson, Muhammad Endashah, Vernon Ricks Jr., Jen Lin, Christina Tai, and myself are constitute a quorum. So that's currently present, and as there additional members join, we will note their presence. Is that okay, Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. I apologize, council member, please go ahead.
Thank you. Some of you I've met before, some I have not. I know Eric and I had a chat by phone yesterday, where I sort of explained my thought process about this. And I think it's important to be really clear that I am not saying there should not be a space for these conversations. What I am saying is that because of the parallel timing in the two different things that were happening locally in Montgomery County and then at the state level, and with where we are now in the evolution of things, this originally came up just to take care of this as a housekeeping matter, meaning the original terms were about to expire. So it seemed like there was a natural end to that, but it was never my intent that there would be nothing to move forward with. And in particular, I feel pretty strongly that it needs to be broader than, it needs to be public safety focused in general, because it's not just a question of what law enforcement do. It's also a question of what a call taker hears in an emergency call center, and what is happening with fire EMS who are co-responding, and sort of the overall ecosystem and landscape of that in those situations, because each person along the way brings something to that, both what their actual functions and missions are, and then of course in the bigger, broader addressing of equity issues and biases, both implicit and explicit. It's that entire ecosystem. 20 years ago, they were more siloed and distinct. In the last 10 years, and particularly in the last 5 years, the public safety disciplines have done fundamentally more cross-training and overlap in work and service, and need to understand and respect their role and the roles of the others within that system. And then of course, the work that you all do in informing what can help advise their profession moving forward and what changes need to be made. I very much look at the Police Accountability Act of 2021. It was a big lift and a big effort at the state with a ton of stakeholders working together collaboratively to bring that to bear. And in reality, I mean, it's more than one bill. It was multiple bills together that brought that all out. So, you know, whether you're talking about the speaker's bill, which was House Bill 670, which is sort of the largest chunk of it, or Anton's Law and the Public Information Act component pieces of it as well. They're all fundamentally linked. And of course, the new use of force standards and things that have gone into effect. They had tiered timelines of when different things would happen under that state law, and the creation of the PAB and the ACC. You have to love government acronyms. Are all, you know, things that are just have been all put in place, and each jurisdiction in the state had to do their thing in order to be compliant with the overall state framework. We are there, we're ready to go. But what I think is the role of something like the PAC, but I would come up with a different acronym for it that is less similar to the other bodies, again, to reduce public confusion, is that it is a multifaceted stakeholder body that advises in the space, must meet within a certain number of times per year, training requirements, of course. And then, you know, and as you and I talked, Mr. Sterling, that was something that was hard to get accomplished, not through anyone's fault, but simply because everything got stood up in the middle of a pandemic. You know, but making sure that we have some tighter guardrails on start, you know, when your terms start, when terms end, when people have to be compliant by, and making sure that, and I know we had talked about this yesterday, but doing things like having some bylaws for the body that would help in the event that someone does need to step down, so something doesn't fall through the cracks. So this is not something unique to the PAC. It's something that I've observed sort of more broadly. And as some of you know, I sponsored an earlier bill in this session that got passed related to adding enhanced Open Meetings Act requirements for our 80+ boards, committees, and commissions, because they weren't all functioning equally. And you all are residents and citizens who devote your time to serve. But you know, you can't necessarily post the minutes to the website. Somebody's got to do it for you at the county, and we had to have better functionality, because if you're doing your part, they need to do their part, and we needed to make sure it was all getting done on behalf of the public, because that's why these public bodies exist, to serve and advise. So what we discussed yesterday, and what I'll share with all of you now, and I've also discussed it with Fatmata Abari, who's the executive director of the PAB, is to not just do a repeal of this, but to do a repeal and replace that works simultaneously to flesh out the body with a mission focus for 2023 in light of the new bodies that exist under state law, so that there's very clear direction about what this body would do, and that it, you know, it would, who it advises, discuss with the other council members, again, whether this should be solely advising the council or whether it is to advise the council and the executive. The PAB's function is to advise the council and the executive, but it is with respect to complaints. And it is limited in complaints regarding law enforcement. It doesn't cover fire EMS. It doesn't cover, 911 dispatch, et cetera. And, you know, if anybody talking through the landscape of these things, in addition to the solely law enforcement focused national issues, the Elijah McClain case in Colorado, that was a situation that went very poorly, very quickly, starting with the caller and the 911 dispatch. And it involved the EMS clinicians, and it involved law enforcement. So, it's important to not function in a vacuum when talking through and addressing those issues. And my experience in working through some of these things at the state has been that it's been very effective to have that broader base of folks together at the same table, because each person brings to bear their own unique professional experience. But no one person is going to know all the different constituent parts, and no one person is going to know all of the regulations and laws that govern each distinct profession, right? And need that forum for the community's feedback piece too. You may tell me the law is this, but this is how it's being received or felt. And so to marry those two together in sort of a broader way. So the example I'd used, and I think I mentioned it to you, Mr. Sterling, and I certainly did with Fatmata, was how when the Safe to Learn Act of 2018 was passed under state law, which is a broad sweeping school safety initiative that was born out of the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida in 2018. That bill, there had been a Center for School Safety at the state. Prior to that, it had discrete functions and it had a governing board. When the Safe to Learn Act was passed, it added to the functions, made that body a grant-making authority, did a host of other things, but it repealed the governing board and then created a sub-cabinet made up of 6 members of the governor's cabinet and an advisory board with very specific membership and who would appoint whom. And I will share that with you in the link so that you all can take a look at what I'm talking about, because it's not fair for me to be talking about a document that you can't see. But that is more of like what I am in. Oh, wow, that's a long URL, but okay, see if that works. It's section 7-1504 of the Maryland Education article, if this link doesn't work, but I will, if not, I will try to put it in a PDF.
Councilmember, is this important for us to look at this section for this conversation regarding your bill?
No, it's just,
Okay.
it would give
Thank
you
you.
understanding as to why, like what I mean by a broad coalition of people, as in that particular case, for example, the advisory board included a superintendent, a classroom teacher, a bus driver, a school nurse, a member of the Maryland Chiefs Association, a member of the Maryland Sheriff's Association, the head of the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, someone from, with emergency medical specialty. So it was broader in that it wasn't, and it had specific missions, and they advised the subcabinet, and the subcabinet would then do regulations or have an annual report that they do. And they sort of feed off of one another, but it's important that there's a tangible product too that is delivered as a result of the work of these bodies.
Councilmember, may I interrupt you? You've had, I gave you as much, I recognize you for as long as you needed. You've spoken for about 10 minutes. And I'm aware
Yes.
you're going to be having to leave at 7.
Yes. There is a question in the chat, and I don't know if you want me to answer it.
I will recognize Ms. Branson in just a moment. I wanted to just ask, I haven't heard why you're proposing to do away with the Policing Advisory Commission. I heard your discussion about the state law, other programs, multiple stakeholders. Was there something that, what is your argument, in a nutshell, for your bill, why we should repeal the Policing Advisory Commission? And then I want to hear, of course, the questions from the members of the commission.
Sure. Repealing it because it is, and to Ms. Ponder's question, yes, there is a county coordinating commission on criminal justice. And that is a separate body already. So, but the Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission, and I sit on that body, does not cover the areas that I have raised as ones that I think would be appropriate for this newly configured body to address, that deal with emergency response and direct response to the public in interaction with law enforcement and other public safety professionals. And that's the key to your question, Mr. Sterling. When this group started out, there wasn't a different state law or state structure. We're in a different place. I think that, and when I say in a different place, I mean legally, like structurally, with new programs and things. And I think that it would be far better for the group to have more direction moving forward in light of where we are now versus when the PAC bill was passed in December of 2019, prior to the pandemic, prior to all the reform efforts at the state, prior to the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, prior to all of that. We're in a
Right.
vastly different position now.
Okay. Can I recognize Sherry Branson at this time?
Mhm.
Yeah, Sherry, go ahead, please.
Oop.
Sorry.
No worries.
So, hi, Councilwoman, how are you? Here's what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but so are you proposing that instead of repeal, you now want to do repeal and replace? Is that
Yes.
where you're going? So does
Yeah.
that mean you're going to withdraw the bill that you have introduced?
No, it would just be amended to include the new provisions.
So, and the new provisions would include the fire and emergency services people, right?
Right.
And so what happens to the Fire and Emergency Services Commission currently under county law?
So I'm talking about this is dealing with the response piece that's just unique to the collective interactions with the public and dealing with the issues of race, implicit bias, disparities, and equities. So,
And so I think it says that they are responsible for the coordination and direction of the county's fire and rescue services, yada, yada, yada. So, I get the feeling this is kind of a moving target, and, you don't probably know me very well, and I don't know you very well, but I spent 20 some years on Capitol Hill. I've seen how legislation gets drafted. And so, and that is the reason I have some real strong concerns about this repeal and replace stuff, because sometimes things just get repealed, they don't get replaced. So
Right.
I would really urge you to
Right.
withdraw the repeal bill. Now, as to, and that's the moving target part of this, because in the initial letter to us on May 19th, it said, thank you for your service. The public thinks you're confusing and duplicative. And so it now sounds as if you're going to totally change the focus of this commission, and potentially make it more confusing and duplicative to the public. So I'm just trying to get real clear. I mean, what I really think would be helpful, because this is totally a moving target at this point. So, I think what would be really helpful is if you actually, work with us to come up with a framework that addresses the concerns that people in the community have. I can tell you that policing is seen differently depending on one's interaction with the police. And, I have all respect for the PAB and the very hard work that the state folks did. But there is still a place for and a need for the public in Montgomery County to be able to have the kind of community engagement that allows folks to have somewhere to go to express their concerns, and a body that enables a broad look at those concerns. That's the function and role that this body plays, that is really different, than the PAB. I mean, we sort of run on parallel tracks. So if you can explain to me, when this, will the newly drafted bill also be on the expedited schedule? When will people have, an appropriate amount of time to really review this and to come up with their comments? So those are my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sherry. I just want to also note that there are two other members of the commission who are seeking recognition as well. Go.
Oh, you froze for a second. So I don't know if Mr. Ricks and Ms. Delane want to ask their questions and then I can address them collectively.
Is that okay with you, Sherry?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ricks.
Yes, Councilmember Lukey, couple of things. What committees do you serve on the council?
On the council, I am on the Public Safety and Health and Human Services Committees. I'm the county's lead, the council's lead for crisis response. And then my other service committees within the county are the Human Trafficking Prevention Committee, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Commission, and the Board of Social Services.
Okay, thank you. Now, what do you know the history of some of the things that were happening that helped to push council people to come up with this commission in the beginning? And
Yes.
just let me run back one or two of them. One of them, there was hollering about SROs in the school.
Mhm.
There was Mr. White's death.
Mhm.
There was Floyd, the George Floyd situation
Yeah.
came up.
Yeah.
And several others, things that came up. And so a number of people got together and they selected people who were to serve on this commission.
Mhm.
And some of the people selected had their own agendas that they brought to the commission.
Mhm.
The commission flushed out a lot of that. And a number of people left the commission, and I think the commission is come back to addressing the concerns that it was originally put together, that it should have been put together for. But I still don't understand why you felt the need to come out with something to get rid of the commission. Now I have worked with different boards and commissions throughout the county for over 40 years or more.
Mhm.
And so I know, different things that have happened. Is it that the commission is costing any money? Because if so, I haven't gotten any. And, in right here at budget time, when people are cutting things, it just seems like it may have been connected to cutting the commission because it was costing the county. So I don't know whether there's transparency in what's happening here, or whether, and then there's some other bills that have come up that we had taken positions on and some that we didn't.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, there were people in Annapolis who got hold of the fact that all these things were happening, and they came up with all these bills. And now we're having problems with young people. They were saying, let the young people do what they want to do. And now we got all of these concerns. And to me, this is the time when the commission should be in place to help try and solve some of these community problems. So I'm just baffled by what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Ricks.
I can give you the quick answer that it's not budget related.
Thank you. And then Christina
Yeah,
Delane. And
Christina.
Christina, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Councilwoman. And thank you for your time. I do have quite a bit of concern with the repeal in general, and then to hear of the repeal and replace, that actually is more concerning. And I would like for you to, if you could identify the reasons. One reason you said was the change in times. Well, we're going to always have changing times. Things are going to evolve. And repeal and replace, that seems legislatively burdensome if that's going to be what we do every time times change, right? So we have something much less burdensome, which would be amendment. Since this is already in place, we already have a structure. We have built relationships with the community. And we have done quite much more broad work than just policing and just the department. We have done work when it comes to dispatch, when it comes to EMS and police service, when it comes to policy in the department. We are on a continuum of those discussions within the commission and also with the community who have been engaged and involved in our past meetings. So I just think it's repeal and replace seems like, so when times change again, Councilwoman, is someone going to come behind your legislation and repeal and replace it? Or would you appreciate it being considered amended instead, since there's already so much work that has gone in building this commission thus far?
So I can say that having been on that governing board that was repealed in that state legislation I was talking about, I was the Attorney General's designee to that governing board. And then having shifted roles and ending up being counsel to that agency and drafting that law, no, I did not consider it personally offensive that a thing that I served on was repealed and replaced with something different that met the policy objectives and goals of the day. This is why we repealed the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights and replaced it with the new structure with the police accountability boards and administrative charging commissions statewide and standardize that. So, you know, I'm not saying that every time the wind blows, there's a legislative change. That's not helpful or useful. However, when you had a bunch of different things happening at the same time, all well-intentioned, but then there is a different path moving forward, you have to say, where are we now? No piece of legislation should sit stale on a shelf forever. Things do change. And if you're not doing that regulatory work and going back and doing housekeeping on your regulations or on your statutes, you're missing the point. And you will miss something. With respect to the other different boards, committees, and commissions, and again, this is part of a bigger, broader issue that I do see around the county. We have a ton of them. What's really important is that each one knows what its task is. And if there is another body out there that's already covering that, when you have multiple boards and commissions, if they start to overlap too much, you're going to end up having conflicting public bodies that are public bodies of the county that are in conflict with one another. And that is not desirable, because what should be coming out of each one is the recommendations and the feedback to the executive, to the council from each body based on its functions, and not go into the other areas that are involved with another public body, unless you do a joint meeting and have a joint discussion, et cetera, right? It's not to say folks can't work together collaboratively, they should. But what if your board or committee or commission was getting into a subject matter area that is wholly handled by someone else, and then you're purporting to speak on behalf of the county while they are also purporting to speak on behalf of the county, and there is conflict? So I think that's something that everyone does need to be mindful of, and having more prescriptive words and language will help the boards, committees, and commissions to stay on task with their functions. And, you know, for lack of a better term, not go into places that they don't need to. And there are different boards and committees that focus on more regulatory aspects of a body versus community interaction. And those are separate functions, and those are separate things. Doesn't mean they shouldn't talk, but they are different and distinct. Because that was something that Ms. Branson brought up earlier about the fire and rescue service board that already exists. And that's different and distinct than this type of community response and racial disparity, inequity in public safety discussion that the PAC was put together to address when it was first formed.
Thank you, Council Member, for addressing those questions. Vice Chair McKinney, you're recognized.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for being here. I would first, I'll say that I agree with the questions that the commissioners have posed. And I'm sort of going over right now, mulling over some of the answers that you gave regarding those. One of the things I was curious about is, as the commission stands right now, when you speak of circumstances, emergency circumstances in particular, why wouldn't you be able to put those issues, because this body responds directly to the council as it's legislatively mandated to, why couldn't you place those issues before this commission as it stands?
We could, I mean, but each entity has its own tasks. If you look at the Air Park Committee, the ACAC, again with the acronyms, bill that I just introduced maybe a month ago, you'll note that there had been a prior entity, the council repealed it. Then that group and constituent group of folks concerned with safety operations around the air park didn't really have an appropriate forum. And it is also part and parcel of our business development and economic development of the county. So I introduced a new bill to reconfigure and give specific direction to require that they do certain things every year. And that's my expectation. And if a body isn't meeting its goals, then something needs to be adjusted. And, you know, to be candid, it wasn't clear what the PAC, how much was functioning. So for example, without doing your annual report last year and without other things, and, you know, yes, there were some bills that got a letter of support or opposition, but the things that fit in the wheelhouse that the body is assigned, the body should be saying, we're taking a support, an opposition, or a letter of information, because we are supposed to be advising the council. And I have not gotten any of that since I have been on the council from the PAC.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate that you've identified actual failings. You know, as you said, you're being candid now and sharing that there actually are specific things that you can identify now at 7 o'clock that are failings of ours, and that's at least helpful to understand you know, why you believe we should be abolished. I just want to, before I recognize Mr. Ricks once more, I wanted to know if Jen Lin or Ruhama had questions as well, or wanted to make a statement.
I don't have any questions at this moment, but yeah, I've been listening.
Thank you, Ruhama. Mr. Ricks.
Yes, council member. This may not have been in our bailiwick, but we saw that mental health was a big issue in policing, in the community, and what have you. We had a number of discussions and people to come on and talk to us. We had discussions with the police department. Jen has been just a marvelous person on educating us and the community on mental health. So I mean, when you say you haven't been getting anything, I don't know where it's been dumped, but we have been very inclusive on our things. We've had council people, 1 or 2, who have come on at 1 or 2 occasions and been educated. Now that we had 7 people then on the council, or 9 was it, or whatever. We have
9.
9. You had 9.
We have a ton of people, 11. And so I think that even though the executive and the council are 2 different bodies of legislation, it looks like one body wants to dump one of the commissions because in my whole years, many years of being here in Montgomery County, it has been that they wanted to have more community involvement and all these committees and what have you. Some committees lasted a week, some lasted 10 years. And I mean, I've served on several of them. So I just, when we talk about repeal and replace, I'm still at a loss as to what the real reason behind this commission, and what about all the other 20 million commissions and committees in the county?
Yeah, no, and again, to your point, Mr. Ricks, I am looking at the other ones too. And, you know, so I'm bringing back in a new form, one that had been terminated, that left a gap in that community. And actually I've known Jen Lynn for quite some time, because Jen and I both served together at the state on, the Youth and Family Subcommittee of the Governor's Commission on Mental and Behavioral Health. And then we also worked on a different work group for the Maryland Behavioral Health Administration related to emergency petitions and the dangerousness standards involved in that. And so, you know, those are certain, and you're very right. Sometimes things get set out and you have a deadline and you're supposed to get it done. And sometimes the struggle is harder to get there than others. And I know I certainly experienced that depending on which work group I was, you know, assigned out to within the state myself. Sometimes the lifts were heavier, but I do think it's important to have more focus. And this really did come about. And Chairman Katz, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and I talked through this, and it was a function of the timing too, since the terms were going to end for the initial 3 years of the PAC members, and the PAB was going into effect on July 1st. So there wasn't any kind of a nefarious, you know, purpose there, other than really to say it was a housekeeping matter time, but also recognizing that summertime is a hard time. And if, with people traveling and things like that, and in thinking this through and saying, well, you don't want to leave a void for that community voice, like what happened with the air park. That's why I said, well, maybe we should switch and do it at the same time simultaneously, as opposed to doing one and then coming up with the other. And I talked to Councilmember Jawando about that over the weekend. So this is not something that I'm doing in a vacuum. I didn't want that to be the case. This was something that was shared with other council members prior to introduction. And I had not received feedback from anyone until we were up introducing the bill. That was the first time I received feedback from any of my colleagues about it. So.
Thank you. Councilmember, if would you be
I'm
available
running
to stay a few more
behind.
moments?
Yeah.
I know your time is very precious. I see that we've been joined by Lori Eskin, who's also a member of the commission. I don't know if Lori has a question. Then I see Sherry Branson's hand.
Oh, Laura, you're on mute. I see you talking, but unmute.
I'm sorry.
There you
I
go.
just want to apologize for getting to the meeting late. My daughter had a slight car accident, so,
Oh,
That's
but
terrible.
I'm here now and I'm afraid I've missed a lot, but, I guess I had felt that this group was doing some valuable and interesting and different work that had been, than was perhaps available from other groups relating to law enforcement. So I'm certainly disappointed that there's a movement to disband. But I'm sure that many of the points that I would make have already been made. And again, I apologize that I couldn't. First, I had to Zoom home and then could not get on right away. But here I am. So.
Thank you, Lori. If Sherry Branson and then Christina Delane could make their questions so that we can get those last comments in before the council member has to depart. Sherry Branson and then Christina Delane.
Hi, so let me just say this, again, I just want to reiterate that I think it's really important that you reconsider whether you will withdraw this particular bill, because repeal and replace, you know, as I said, this seems to be a moving target. And I really do feel like community involvement is targeted here. The format that you propose seems to me to be likely very law enforcement and public safety centric. And that is not what this commission has been doing, although unlike the PAB, we do have ex officio representatives of law enforcement on our commission. And I guess, you know, I just want to leave you with the following thing about the whole air park thing. You know, people, the air park is a part of the Revenue Authority, as I'm sure everyone is aware. And so, you know, the air park commission was disbanded because, you know, there was a sentiment that they were just hearing nothing but complaints. They had no authority to do anything. And you know, and so that, you know, it seems to me that, you know, and that brings kind of to light to me what seems to be your complaints about this board, that we don't do anything, which I disagree with. But the way to, you know, approach the air park's lack of authority, which was the underlying problem, is, you know, would be to compel the Revenue Authority to do something. You know, I mean, so my only point is that when it comes to legislative outcomes, there are really a whole lot of different ways to hit the same place. And what I still haven't heard is the outcome you seek. You know, this, you know, what problem do you believe repealing this board will solve? Because the notion that, you know, we need to there needs to be a broader scope actually directly conflicts with your earlier May 19th letter to us that we were confusing to people. So I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to figure out, you know, what's the real goal. I mean, I think Vernon said it best, like, what's really behind this? We don't, I still have no clue as to what the desired legislative outcome is. And if you have some language and documents that you could forward to us about what the desired legislative outcome is and how you believe that will positively impact the communities in Montgomery County who are often marginalized by their interactions with the police and with other public safety personnel, because that's the problem to be solved, right? So if you have some, you know, document that explains how all this would work and some sort of statistical or evidentiary support for that, I think, you know, it would be extraordinarily helpful. But for right now, you know, quite frankly, with all due respect, what I hear is that's what you think, that's what you feel, so that's what you want to do. And that's troubling. That's just legislatively, that's troubling.
Well, Ms. Branson, with all due respect, I disagree. And I understand that you feel a certain way about this. These aren't based on my feelings, or it's based on, frankly, I thought this group had disbanded and was not functioning anymore. And that is not necessarily an unrealistic sentiment that is, you know, widely shared. If the body is supposed to have produced an annual report every year and has only done one, that's a problem. It's not functioning. You know, I believe that public bodies, if they are to be created, exist in order to inform policymaking. If in fact the group meets whenever it does meet, but it is not doing the informing to the policymakers it is supposed to be providing information to in that formalistic way and can't make that deadline, then it doesn't need to exist in that form. If it needs help to get there in order to have that space, have those discussions, and meet deliverables back to the legislative body and to the executive, then we owe a duty as policymakers to write that in a way that makes it abundantly clear what our expectations are so that the members of the body deliver it. And I also think it is critically important, and I did do this in the air park legislation, because you're right, there were a lot of the same people coming over and over again saying the same things, and it was like Groundhog Day. We don't need that. And so if you look at the draft language in that bill, I was very, very specific about staggered terms, capped limits on service, because you want fresh voices and fresh perspectives. You don't need to have everyone talking in an echo chamber. And I think that that is critically important to positive policymaking. And so to the extent that this group might need a little lift or help along the way in order to get to where it needs to be, then I'm here to try to partner with you to get there. But I don't think it's productive to have, you know, this group talk amongst itself, not share out that information to the body that it is supposed to be advising, and not meet its deliverables. That's disappointing to me as a policymaker. That's disappointing to me as a resident that that had happened. And I fully appreciate that there were a lot of circumstances that led to that. You know, again, timing, pandemic, all kinds of things, right?
Well, we're disappointed that we didn't get a annual report out, and we can understand your serious disappointment that we didn't produce an annual report. I am surprised that you thought that we had disbanded, but that you think that that's a widely held view. That's news to me. But Miss Delane has had her hand up, and I'd like to recognize.
Yeah, I'm running quite late.
I'll make it
You've been
very
very,
quick.
very generous. I appreciate that very much. Can I recognize Miss Delane for just a moment?
Yes, oh, please. Thank you, Councilwoman. We definitely honor and appreciate your time here. So if informing the council more is the thing, I think that's something we can definitely do. And I'm afraid or kind of cautious to say that we haven't produced anything. There may be a chance that you just haven't received it. So I'm willing to accept the challenge of providing you with whatever we have ever presented to the council to make sure that something hasn't just missed your desk. Right, we've had some pretty heavy hitters in this meeting, in these meetings. And so I am also surprised to hear that you thought, along with the others that you refer to as the widespread view, that we had disbanded. That's disappointing. And I would not imagine that to have been the truth from what I've experienced with the commission. But I think that with what Sherry has said in terms of having something written, it would be great if we could be more informed with what you are proposing to replace this with. So repeal and replace is great, but like just saying replace, just saying we're going to add this legislation, like it would be great to have an informed discussion with you, because what you are proposing may very well be a better option. It's just we have nothing to look at or to see or to in order to form that opinion. So that would be wonderful. The one other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned that the repeal and replace, you're not doing this in a vacuum. You spoke to other council members, and you specifically said over the weekend you spoke to Councilman Jawanda. And I just wanted to clarify, are you indicating that he agrees with the path that you're taking with repeal and replace, or what were you trying to indicate there by mentioning that you spoke with him regarding the repeal and replace?
Yes, I mean, I had a lengthy conversation with him on Saturday about this, and, you know, said, I get, you know, I think it would be good to, rather than just repeal outright and work on something subsequent, so as to not have a gap, to do it simultaneously. And we talked through the issues that I've raised here with respect to interdisciplinary overlap in public safety and these particular equity issues and community engagement issues and responses. But, you know, also fully recognizing and having that discussion with him too about the sort of lack of deliverables here and the churn of the chairmanship. And thank you, Mr. Sterling, for stepping up to lead. But this has been a really serious challenge when there's that much churn in a group over time. And again, I fully respect that you all are volunteers and volunteer your time and service to the county and to these important issues, but we have to have people be accountable to fulfilling those duties once they accept them. And if in fact life happens, as it does, and somebody needs to resign, we need to have a process in place for replacement that keeps the train on the tracks. So.
And Mr. Sterling, I know I had spoken with you just before the bill was released to the public. I think, you know, the first time, as somebody who follows the public safety for Councilmember Jawando, the first time we were aware of the bill was on the tentative schedule for the council meeting. And then, you know, it wasn't until later that the bill was formally posted. And just for myself, I've only been here since the beginning of December, but have come at least, you know, Councilmember Jawando appreciated, I know, the opportunity to speak with the PAC about the STEP Act. And we had a very substantive discussion and very thoughtful discussion at that time. And then I believe I also, I don't know if the discussion on the traffic enforcement report that you all did, whether that was I don't recall whether that was a Zoom or webinar, but, you know, I think Susan has done a good job of informing at least those of us on a public safety listserv in the council about, you know, when the meetings are happening, that kind of thing. So we are able to participate in that way. And I know that, you know, I remember that traffic enforcement discussion also being very, very rich with very interesting comments from the public, from law enforcement, that kind of thing. So I, you know, just wanted to recognize, at least for our office, since I've been here, you know, I found those two opportunities for very rich discussion and have appreciated that. You know, and I appreciated when I spoke with Mr. Sterling before the bill was, you know, before it was formally introduced, you know, he was not willing to give his view on the record until he discussed it with his colleagues. So appreciated that as well.
Thank you. Do you have time to recognize the vice chair, council member?
Mm-hmm. And I just want to
Councilwoman,
clarify,
thank
I guess
you. And
I did want to ask you or tell you, this is not my first meeting with you all. I've actually been on prior meetings, but not since I've been a council person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't remember that. If
I
there's a
just
record
did not want to
reflect
leave,
that.
Vice Chair.
I just did not want to leave unaddressed the collection of things that occurred that delayed the report that you spoke about. One thing occurred, we had our sitting chair resign. We had selected a new chair, which was Ms. Branson. And then unfortunately for us at that point, prior to selecting our vice chair, new vice chair, Ms. Branson was assigned to another commission. And as a result, that left us open in two spots, having no chair and no vice chair. So we went through that process as well, but collectively we were trying to deal with the issues that were on our plate. So I just wanted to address that and make sure that that was covered here, but thank you.
Yes. Yes, and thank you, Mr. McKinney. And I was aware of the series of
And the
things.
first chair resigned, the first chair left, so.
First chair left, second chair left, vice chair left.
But not for frivolous reasons. There were
No.
solid reasons behind that. And despite changing of the chairs, I've only been on the commission for 1 year, but I can think of 5 products in that 1 year time frame. And, you know, that's pretty astounding for a volunteer commission.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Councilmember, you've been very generous. I see that it's almost 7:30.
Half hour behind schedule.
We have been joined by Dr. Robin Gaster, who was an original member of the commission. I saw him raise his hand. Do you have time to hear from him before you leave?
We've actually spoken previously, and he contacted me while I worked for the state to ask about data collections. Presumably, he said to talk about the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center and what it collected. So I agreed to speak with him. However, when I got on the call, he then insisted on videotaping it and wanting to talk about criminal justice records, which are not part of the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center's information sets. I directed him to the appropriate entities to handle that information query. And I directed him to the executive director of the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. So I think I'm good, and I'm gonna go.
If I just make the point then that Robin's example of a member of the commission trying to diligently track down relevant data, at least you've experienced firsthand an instance where we've been trying to do our work. And I'm sorry if it seemed inappropriate by asking to record it, and that you weren't the right person to contact, but I think that it is an example. But Councilmember, thank you very, very much for your time, and we certainly appreciate your interest, and look forward to working with you on however the legislation evolves, so that we can at least accomplish the goal that I think we all share.
Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Friends, it's 7:30, and we have another half hour. The council member was extremely generous with her time to hear our concerns and to respond to our comments and our questions. I'm now willing to recognize any member for their thoughts about sort of how we might proceed regarding this proposed legislation that is, I guess, scheduled for a hearing, I think, on Tuesday, the 13th of June.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Ricks is recognized.
I think this thing is on a railroad track and ain't no turning back. She did not sound like she was willing to change anything.
Well, Ms. Branson?
I agree that with Vernon's assessment that the councilwoman sounds unwilling to engage in a transparent and compromise, a discussion that would lead to compromise. I should say it that way. She sounds very unwilling to do that. However, to me, that does not mean that the other members of the council share her viewpoint. And so what I would suggest is that this body, and we can do it individually or collectively, we still have our ability as residents of this great county to testify. And so, we can certainly individually sign up to testify. I would recommend that people who feel that whatever way you want to feel about the legislation, do that. And I would hope that Susan, as soon as she drops this new bill, because it sounds to me substantially new, that you get it to us so that we can actually have an opportunity to read it.
I have no doubt that Susan will do that in the regular course, as she always does.
Yeah.
To keep us up
My
to-
understanding, I'm sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
My understanding is this is an amendment, so that'll happen when they have a public safety work session on it.
And so that would be, and that's the issue here. So there will be a public hearing on June 13th, correct? And that public hearing is the time in which folks can give their opinion. But the language that, the proposed language that we have been, that has been shared with us, or the proposed thinking, because there ain't no language, the proposed thinking that's been shared with us tonight will not surface until after that. So, you know, this is sort of, you know, I hate to say it, but I worked in Congress for 20 some years, and legislation by surprise is never my definition of transparency. This appears to be what it is. And so I suggest that, you know, people can definitely do what they want. But if you are concerned about a practice of repeal and replace, which I know we've heard before in many circumstances where people try to do the repeal and never get around to the replace, then, you know, I would suggest that folks may want to testify.
Thank you, Sherry. Ty and then Christina.
Well, I agree pretty much with the position of Commissioner Branson, and I would also add this. It's very difficult here to be placed in this spot in two ways: very little time to respond, and also to actually ingest what has been said today. And I would think that it would be something that we would address at our scheduled meeting. Is it June 12th? To give people a little more time to ingest what has been stated so far. It's hard to wage either pro or con against something that you haven't seen. And what we've heard so far is that there is a forthcoming proposal. However, with Ms. Branson, there's nothing to verify that is indeed the case. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place here. And I think we're just going to have to, you know, try and be watchful and individually first and foremost to see if we are collectively standing in the same position on what is being proposed.
Thank you, Ty. Christina?
Thank you. First, apologies to Commissioner Branson. At the time when I was speaking to Councilwoman, I could not recall your last name, and I was looking away from the screen as I was speaking, so I meant no disrespect, and I apologize for that. I did have a question about the difference on the legislation that Councilwoman was talking about, and maybe my clarity, someone can refine for me a bit, because at one point it sounded as if it was the same thing. What she was trying to repeal and replace with was what we are actually doing. And then later in the discussion, it seemed as if it went to being more public safety focused and actually not the same thing at all, which would then leave a void. So it seemed, I felt like we were talking about like whatever is being replaced with. I felt like we were talking about a different thing at different points in the conversation. So I'm not clear on if, and I'm not sure how many times people have not turned in an annual report, but I think missing an annual report, I'm not sure if that's substantial. I don't know how important it is. I know it's important. I don't know if it reaches the level of importance to terminate a commission entirely, especially if there are significant and relevant reasons as to why that happens and occurred. So I guess there's two parts, right? Is the annual report one that's a rare occurrence that commissions and committees that does not happen, and we have made a cardinal sin? It is one question. Then the second part is, was I the only one that felt like in the discussion, the replace, whatever that replace would be, was more than one thing? Like at one point it was one thing in the conversation, at another point it was another thing. Thank you.
Anyone wish to respond?
Yeah, since you mentioned my name, first of all, feel free to call me Sharia, that's fine. And secondly, I share your concerns about the changing nature of what was being described to us. That's why I call it a moving target. And that's why I wanted to get clarity from Susan about when that language would actually be seen, because I kind of thought I knew the answer, but I wanted to make sure people understood the answer. So, so what will go forward on the 13th is repeal. That's all that's gonna be there, okay? Then later, the promise is that there will be replacement language, which none of us have seen and have no idea what it is. So that is what, leads me to be very concerned. And on the issue of the annual report, first of all, we could do that now if we wanted to. There's no like drop dead, we can't do it. Okay. And like Vernon, I've been on these boards and commissions for a gazillion years. And the annual report has never been a big old deal. This is, Vernon intimated, and I share that concern, if that's what I heard, that there's really something else going on here. And I cannot ascribe motives to people. I would not do that, but there seems to be a true determination to get rid of this panel. And I firmly and steadfastly believe that the people of Montgomery County need a place to go to say the things they want to say about policing in this county. And if we don't do anything else, we do that.
Thank you. Mr. Ricks, once more.
Yeah, thank you, sir. To me, this sounds like another planning board situation. Terms, and we can get rid of this thing real quick. She mentioned that she had conversations with Will Juwando, and he was one of the people who sponsored putting this committee together, this commission together. And so
I'll just say, Mr. Ricks, let me interrupt and say, I hope everyone went back and heard the comments on the record from Councilmember Juwando, Councilmember Mink, and Councilmember Sales about the introduction of this bill. I'm really not up to date about the conversation they had this weekend, but if you go back and listen to those comments, I think that would be very instructive. And he flags that, this was news. This was news to everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ms. Johnson.
all I can say is I'm speaking to what I heard tonight. I'm speaking to what I heard tonight. And at the end of the terms, okay, everybody can go on June the 30th. That's what I heard tonight. And we're gonna put something else together. And it may not be what y'all think it is. So, all I'm saying is I heard what I thought I heard, and I heard what I heard. So.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. What I'd like to, ask is if the commission would be okay if I attempted to put together a statement on behalf of the commission that attempted to argue that the commission has had a positive role representing the community and providing oversight of the police of the Montgomery County Police Department, and to summarize the work that we've done since we got started, and the public hearings that we've held, the reports that we've issued, the correspondence we've engaged in, and the matters which are currently ongoing that we're engaged in.
So moved.
Did we have at least two public hearings?
Yes.
Then she didn't hear about it. She didn't mention that.
No, there's, I am moving that Eric put together a draft statement for distribution to this body. That's it. That's the motion.
I second that motion.
Was that Christina?
That is, yes, yes.
Are there comments, question, debate about Sherry's motion that I draft a statement to distribute to the PAC that would express the record of the PAC for the public hearing. Is there any discussion?
Well,
Just
Mr.
hope that the
Chairman, if,
statement,
Mr.
Susan, you
Chairman,
have
if there's
some guidance, I think.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if there's no commentary on that, is there any way that we could vote just to make sure that we have everybody to know where they are on this?
Do you mean having a record vote? Is that your question?
Yes.
We'll do that, but Susan needs, I wanted to recognize Susan on the procedural and other advice that she has for us.
Yes, I just wanted to caution about you putting together draft language and then distributing to the entire commission and then having people weigh in individually, because that could constitute an open meetings violation. And an easier way to do this would be to form a subcommittee to handle it, or to make sure that people only respond to you, and then have those comments discussed when you meet again on June 12th.
The second one would be better.
Yeah.
So if Sherry, if you're acceptable to a friendly amendment that the draft, that members of the commission, after they've received this draft statement, would respond directly to me with their comments and corrections in order to make sure that we're complying with the open meeting law.
No problem. I totally accept that.
Okay. So the question then is now to vote on Sherry's
and
motion.
one other quick
Oh, I'm
comment.
sorry, Mr. Ricks, please go ahead.
I just hope that the letter is not a sweetheart letter.
Oh, what?
I hope it is not a sweetheart.
A sweetheart letter?
You will have an opportunity to add your 2 cents worth, Bernard, and I'm sure you can accomplish that.
So y'all don't want me to write the letter.
So the other side of that is a poison pen letter?
Yeah, if I write the letter, y'all be going on the 29th of June.
I will try to write a straightforward politic letter that accomplishes what I think our joint objective is, that we believe that we have been of service and that we continue to be of service, and we want to continue to be of service.
And that's been moved and seconded. Are we voting on that?
So yes, so I'd like to call the question. I'd like to have, if we can have a roll call vote.
Okay.
Susan, could you call the roll? Would that be okay? Or,
Just do
Sure,
it.
I will.
okay, thank you.
Ms. Branson,
I vote yes.
Mr. Sterling,
Yes,
Ms. Ekstrand,
Yes.
Dr. Gaster,
Yes.
Ms. Delane,
Yes.
Mr. McKinney,
Aye.
Mr. Ricks,
Yes,
who have I missed?
Ruhama,
Ms.
And
Indershaw,
Jen.
I vote yes.
Is Jen voting?
Ms.
And-
Lynn Jen, she's driving, and I'm not sure how much she can interact at this point.
Okay, well,
it's,
so it's unanimous of all those voting.
thank you, Susan. So I counted 8 yes, and there were no no's, and there were no abstentions.
Correct.
Thank you. I'll start putting something together tomorrow. Are there other matters to be brought forward regarding this, or comments or observations that folks want to make? I can, at this point, let me, if I see that there's staff or Councilmember Mink, Councilmember Sales, Councilmember Jawando. If you wish to make a comment that might help us, you're recognized at this time.
Hi,
Carlene. Oh, was there somebody else talking?
oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Carlene Ponder with Councilmember Kristen Mink's office. The council member is very supportive of transparency and accountability in our policing operations. And I think it was noted earlier that the PAC came about due to community initiation and support from members of the county council at that time to recognize that community input was missing. But not only was community input missing, we didn't have an advisory commission on policing to the county council at that time, and especially one that was originated with community members and community input, and not being heavily weighed in favor of police and police input. So, we're just monitoring the legislation and any developments to make sure that we're not doing anything to undermine what the public intended here. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll speak up. My name is Chris Leacock with Councilmember Sales Office. Please forgive me for not turning on my camera. I've been having a little bit of issues with my computer lately, but it was mentioned that the Councilmember Sales is one of the people who made some remarks about this when it was introduced. I can tell you it was a bit of a surprise to us, and we are now in the information gathering aspect of it. We want to get input from all of you on the commission itself, along with get other input from other members of the community. I can tell you Councilmember Sales has placed a premium on transparency as well. It's something that we're working on council, and I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat. I am happy to meet with any or all of you, see if we can set meetings with council member before we go forward on this to discuss any specific issues you may have that you want to do so. Just in one-on-one meetings with me or with the council member, I'm happy to facilitate, and please feel free to send me any information you have as well, so I can make sure she remains informed about this decision going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Laycock. I wanted to ask Sergeant Brewer, who's been with us since day one, representing very, very capably the Fraternal Order of Police, and Captain Flynn, if they had any observations that would be useful for this discussion.
I'll defer to the captain first.
I was actually going to defer to you, ma'am, since you've been here longer.
I'll take that since it's from a captain. I think I don't know that if it's proper for me to comment on my opinions of this. The one thing I will say is one thing that was brought up was statistics. If somebody can show statistics, I ask that you guys are looking at statistics. You look at how many views our meetings have had. And I just wonder if the lack of views that many of the meetings have had is one of the reasons that they believe that we have disbanded previously. It's just, there doesn't seem, and I know simple views is not an indication potentially of how the community perceives this commission. I just, if we're asking for tangibles from them, that's a tangible that they have to come back at the PAC with. So I just think it's something that should at least be considered and should be prepared with answers. I take no stance one way or the other. Again, I'm an ex-fascio member. That's the one thing I heard in looking at tangibles. I think that has to be something that is considered when responding to this bill and to the communication that we've had today.
Sergeant Brewer, you have always had good comments, and this is another good one. Thank you very much. Anything else, Captain Flynn, that you would want to add before I recognize Dr. Gaster?
Well, I guess I would just kind of piggyback on Sergeant Brewer's remarks, which is that I know this group to be incredibly intelligent, incredibly knowledgeable, and incredibly helpful. I don't know that, you know, just from listening to the council members' comments tonight, I'm not sure if they've necessarily recognized some of the great work that you guys have done. But I absolutely just want to say that I appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate the fact that everyone's interested in the transparency and helping the police department. And I'm very grateful. You know, I think it's a compliment to you, even that you would allow myself and Sergeant Brewer to participate in the meetings. I mean, that to me, you know, just goes to show you definitely want to help, but at the same time, you're always willing to listen, and I appreciate that. And similarly, I don't know that it is our position to sort of weigh in on the overall, you know, place of the group, but I definitely appreciate the voice, and I appreciate everything that I've heard from you that I can take back to our department so we can, you know, try to get better. That was it.
Well, we appreciate your compliments, Captain Flynn. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Gaster?
Yeah, first of all, sorry for being late. I got unavoidably detained, though I got the gist of the council members' position. I guess I just want to say that we should, I think, make the point that it is a mistake to think that the accountability board can do what the PAC does. The accountability board will be swamped with individual cases. That's what it's designed for. That's what it's going to do. It's going to spend almost all its time on that. And there is no sign that it is developing any analytic capability to go beyond that. So essentially, this is, you know, this is regrettably an effort to remove an analytic capability from the policing environment in Montgomery County. And that is, to me, that's regrettable. Whether or not you think we've done the best job possible, I think is irrelevant. It would be better to suggest ways in which we could improve. So that's what I had to say.
Thank you, Robin. Mr. Ricks and then Ms. Delane.
Yes, sir. I just want to point out the fact that we should make note to them that people on the commission went through the police academy program for X number of weeks to learn about the training and all the other things. And, you know, and it was during the pandemic. We still met. You know, I mean, we had a slow start because of the pandemic, somewhat of a slow start. But when she said that we haven't been meeting, I mean, we didn't meet in May this year because we were.
It was the only time that we've not met monthly in all of the months that I've been on the commission.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm baffled. Somewhere or another, the information is dropping off between here and the Stella Warner building for some reason.
I'm looking at the time so are there some final thoughts before we resolve? I see Lori, and then I see Christina, and then Kate, who sought recognition briefly, but you've turned your hand off. Lori, I'll recognize you.
Yeah. I just want to reinforce what Robin had to say about analytic capacity. You know, that, you know, I think that this group has been able to do analysis work that not only would the accountability board not be able to do, but also it's been something that the police department itself hasn't been doing on its own. So I think that in itself has been quite a contribution. And I'll
Thank
lower my hand. Thank you.
And I just want to, as a, as long as we're giving you
Sherry,
little hints
Sherry,
to put
let me
your,
just recognize Christina and then whose hand was up, and then I'll recognize you. Christina, please go ahead.
Yes, so I'm not completely convinced that the work that has been done and submitted to council has gotten lost along the way to certain people's offices. And I think it's really challenging for me to hear someone say that things haven't been done and things haven't been reported when they actually have. Like, that's such a bold statement to make. And when the work has actually been done, just because you haven't with your own physical eyes seen it, that's so bold and quite frankly disrespectful to the work that this commission has done thus far. And I wanted to put that on the record. Also, I think it's important to note that when anything, legislation or anything is so eager and so rushed to get anything done in such a vague way, it's dangerous. It's a very dangerous move that's about to happen. As I think it was Council Member Meek's office said, this was a community initiative originally. And when you snatch something away from the community, it will suffer. That is disheartening. Like, this could bring me to tears because it connects our community to the public safety community, to the policing community, and taking that away, removing the community voice is going to leave such a void that it will be felt. It may have been something we yearned for before when it didn't exist, but now that it has existed, then taking away is like taking candy from a baby. And we all know that's a fight. And so I think it's something that, like, rushed leaves much less time to be scrutinized. So whatever it is we have to do to avoid this community catastrophe, I believe it is that serious. The relationships that exist between the community and the public safety and policing community is so vital to the functioning of this county that removing that voice in the middle, which is the PAC, is going to be detrimental. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sri Branson and then Ms. Vasanen, I think we're just going to be about finished. Sheree?
yeah, I just want to also point out that two things. One, I think this is one of the few commissions that actually has designated youth representation, which is incredibly important in discussing police matters. And secondly, we are here, I respect the point about how many views we get, but to be honest, not everybody's going to sit around and click on a meeting. People talk, they talk amongst themselves, and I hear back from people who tell me things that I said in the meeting. I'm like, but you weren't there, and they're like, yeah, but they heard. So there's a lot of different ways to get things out into the community, and yes, I think we could do a better job on our publicity. But as to the earlier point, if there are deficiencies, then let's fix those. This is clearly throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and so let's fix the deficiencies that she apparently sees in us, and let's seek help in doing that. That's, but really my big point is in your drafting, I think pointing out the youth participation we have is just incredibly important.
Thank you, Sheree.
I have one point of information maybe Susan can help me with.
Mr. Richards.
What was the original documents? Didn't it call for us to meet once a quarter at least?
I think it was 6 times a year.
Yes, it was at least 6 times a year, more if necessary.
Okay, and does statistics show that we met 6 times
Absolutely. In fact, when you were first convened, that first year you were meeting every other week, and that actually caused some absentee issues. And I think that is what led to some of the resignations that we've experienced in the first year. And I had worked with the chair at that time, and they went back to the once monthly work session.
Okay, so we met that criteria, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
And more.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ricks. Thank you for that point. I'm conscious of the time. I'd like to recognize Ms. Van Sanen, and I apologize for not saying your name correctly.
Dan Sannon, thank you so much. This is just a small point responding to, is it Ms. Delane? I thought it was important that she mentioned, you know, that this was a group that had formed from the community, and myself being fairly new to the council, I was just taking a look at some of the very extensive legislative history on, you know, the bill that introduced the PAC. And if you haven't looked at that, I'm sure you have, but you know, that would be important to take a look and recognize, you know, Councilmember Reamer and his dear colleagues letter of March 29th, 2019. For the past 6 months, he's worked with representatives from the Montgomery County chapter of the NAACP and other groups. And then, you know, there's an interesting letter from to County Executive Elridge from ACLU of Maryland, CASA, Identity, Jews United for Justice, Montgomery County NAACP, about, quote, our proposed policing advisory commission. So just I was also, as somebody newish to the council, was interested to look back at that legislative history, which is quite extensive. And, you know, Ms. Delane's point made me think of that. Important to note the involvement of those groups.
Thank you. I hope that those.
Wasn't it coalition?
Excuse me just a moment, Mr. Ricks. I hope that those groups that lobbied so hard for the creation of the PAC at this point feel that we have to some extent fulfilled their objectives, and we haven't at least heard from them that we have not, but thank you very much for that.
Just very quickly, wasn't the Silver Spring Justice Coalition one of those organizations who were advocating for it?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Ricks. Ms. Delane, I think I'm going to let you have the last word before we have a motion to adjourn. Your hand was up.
Yes, it was left up. That is so kind. So I feel so much pressure to have the last word. Can I give that last word actually to Commissioner Branson? I feel like she has a very encouraging things to say.
Sure. Cherie, you're recognized.
If she'll accept.
Well, yeah, my hand wasn't up, and I think you may overestimate me, but people usually underestimate me, so that's a good thing. I think it's a Southern accent that does it. So you know, I think I've been really clear. I was a part of those initial meetings with Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember Jawando, Robin Gaster. I mean, there were a number of people involved in the community who really wanted to see this happen. I was representing the NAACP at that point. So it is absolutely, we went through a whole lot to try and make sure that every council member would feel as though their constituency was recognized and heard from. You know, we went through a lot to make sure that members of the police, of the law enforcement community, would make sure that they had a voice at this table. I mean, there was a real effort to assure that everyone that this would not be considered a get the police thing. You know, this would be considered a commission that would seriously undertake the very hard and arduous work of what civilian reform looks like. I don't have to tell you all this. Maybe I do. But, you know, in the year 2000, the Montgomery County NAACP had filed a complaint with the U.S. Justice Department, which led to a memorandum of understanding about traffic stops in this county. You know,
Yeah.
so this, you know, pardon the vernacular, but this ain't nothing new. And so, you know, we are at the culmination of 20 some years of disparate policing that has adversely affected the Black and brown community. And to have someone come along and say, no, y'all can just go home now is hurtful on all kinds of levels. And so, yes, if for no other reason than to assure our continuation or the continuation of this body, you know, this body is the culmination of years of effort and years of suffering in the Black and brown community. We can't give up without a fight.
Well, that's very powerful, Cherie. I think those are I think those are perfect words for us to adjourn with this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I second the motion. I make the motion to adjourn.
Time moves to adjourn, and who second?
Cherie.
Cherie seconds. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries. We will reconvene again on June 2nd, but in the interim, you'll be getting communication from me regarding a statement to submit to the council. I thank all of you for coming this evening. I especially thank our visitors from the public and the council staff, and of course, Susan and Logan. Thank you so much for your support. As always, we can't do this without you, and we're very, very grateful. I think we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night.
Hi, Eric.
Thank you.
Good night, thanks.